Evelyn first met James on a crisp autumn day in Central Park. The leaves crunched satisfyingly under her boots as she strolled along the tree-lined paths, a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice tucked under her arm. She hardly noticed the other people milling about, absorbed as she was in her own thoughts and the colorful foliage dancing on the breeze. Suddenly, a large fluffy shape came bounding toward her, leaping up and nearly knocking the book from her hands. Evelyn yelped in surprise as a big, friendly golden retriever licked her fingertips and snuffled eagerly at the pages of the novel. "Zeus, down boy!" called a deep, slightly panicked voice. Evelyn turned to see a tall young man with chocolate brown hair and bright blue eyes jogging over, a leash and tennis ball in hand. He had an honest, open face creased with worry and apology. "I'm so sorry, miss." He slipped away from me. "I hope he didn't frighten you?" the man said sincerely as he grabbed the dog's collar. Evelyn shook her head, unable to suppress a smile at the retriever's irrepressible joy. "Not at all, he seems very sweet. And he has good taste in literature," she joked, holding up her rather soggy book. The man laughed, a warm sound that sent a little shiver down her spine. "Ah yes, Austen, a perennial favorite. You've read Pride and Prejudice?" Evelyn asked, pleasantly surprised. He nodded. "Of course, I'm an English teacher. Have to keep up with the classics. I'm James, by the way," he said, extending a hand. "Evelyn," she replied, grasping his hand. It was large and slightly rough, but his grip was gentle. They smiled at each other for a beat too long before James cleared his throat. "Well, I should let you get back to your walk. Again, my apologies for the disruption." He tugged at Zeus's leash. The dog whined in protest but obediently followed as James turned to go. "Wait!" Evelyn called out impulsively. "There's a lovely little cafe just down the path. Perhaps you'd like to join me for a coffee, and we could discuss Austen further." James's face lit up with another one of those heart-stopping smiles. "I'd like that very much." As they ambled toward the cafe, a hint of winter's chill nipping at their heels, Evelyn felt the first tender roots of something begin to unfurl within her chest, like a seed long dormant finally pushing through the frosty soil toward the distant promise of spring. Winter descended on New York in a flurry of snowflakes and twinkling lights. For Evelyn and James, the coldest months were warmed by the glow of their blossoming relationship. Nearly every day found them meeting for walks in the frosty park, cheeks pink and fingers entwined. They would wander for hours, breath clouding the air, taking shelter in cozy bookstores and cramped cafes. Evelyn quickly discovered that James's passion for literature rivaled her own. They spent long evenings by the fire debating Shakespeare and Shelley, Dickens and Dostoevsky. But James revealed other endearing quirks as well: an obsession with peppermint tea, a boyish love of science fiction films, a charming compulsion to read every historic plaque they passed. Evelyn couldn't remember the last time she'd smiled and laughed so much. As the holidays drew near, James hatched a plan. On Christmas Eve, he brought Evelyn to their favorite secluded spot in the park, a small clearing guarded by a copse of white-dusted pine trees. There he had laid out a picnic of thermoses filled with peppermint tea and hearty winter stew. They huddled on the old quilt, steam from the tea mingling with the crisp air. When their bellies were full and warm, James took Evelyn's mittened hands in his. "Evelyn, I know it's only been a few months, but in that time you've become dearer to me than I could have imagined. Your keen mind, your adventurous spirit, your gentle heart. I'm quite certain I'm falling in love with you." Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes even as an incandescent happiness bloomed in her chest. "Oh, James, I'm quite certain I'm falling in love with you too." He kissed her then, soft and sweet as snowflakes. Later that night, wrapped in each other's arms as the city settled into a contented Christmas hush outside the frosted windows, Evelyn realized she had never known a peace so pure and complete. Spring arrived shyly, the city slowly shedding its icy mantle and tiny buds appearing on skeletal tree branches. In the park, green shoots pushed through the muddy earth and the first brave robins returned, their calls echoing across fields slowly turning from brown to verdant. For Evelyn, the warming temperatures and lengthening days were accompanied by a deepening certainty in her feelings for James. With every tender moment shared, every whispered confession. She fell further into a love more profound than she had ever imagined she would find. In late April, they planned a trip outside the city, renting a small cabin in the Hudson Valley for a weekend immersed in nature's renewal. They spent the daylight hours rambling along gurgling streams fringed with delicate wildflowers and marveling at the pastel blossoms adorning gnarled apple trees long ago planted by some pioneer farmers' hopeful hands. As dusk fell on their second evening, they built a crackling campfire under a sky turning to periwinkle silk and had a rustic dinner of roasted hot dogs and s'mores. Sticky, laughing, and more than a little drunk on cheap red wine and each other, they lay back on a blanket and watched as the stars winked into existence one by one. "This is perfection," Evelyn murmured, curling deeper into James's side. "You, me, the stars." James shifted, bracing himself on an elbow to hover over her. The firelight cast flickering shadows across the planes of his face as he gazed down at her. "Evelyn, I love you, utterly, completely. You are everything I never knew I needed." Evelyn reached up to stroke his cheek. "I love you too, James, more than I have words to express. You've brought a joy and color to my life I never thought possible." He dipped his head to capture her lips with his. They made love there under the diamond-strewn sky, all desperate passion and reverent caresses. Later, drowsy and sated, Evelyn drifted off to sleep wrapped in James's arms. In the darkness behind her eyelids bloomed visions of a shared future, as full of promise as the riotous rush of life unfurling in the forest around them. Summer settled over the city like a heavy velvet cloak, the air thick and redolent with the perfume of hot asphalt and smoke from backyard barbecues. It was a season of rooftop gatherings that lasted until the fireflies came out, fire hydrants gushing onto shimmering streets, and Central Park lawns crowded with sunbathers and picnickers. For James and Evelyn, the long, lazy days seemed to stretch out into an infinite future where their love was the only constant in a hazy, golden world. They whiled away many afternoons sprawled on an old quilt under the shelter of a favored massive oak tree, an oscillating fan and cooler of iced lemonade at hand to ward off the oppressive heat. James would often read aloud as Evelyn rested her head in his lap, his mellifluous voice breathing new life into old words. As June slipped into July, they began to make tentative plans for a more permanent future together. Strolling through the sultry evenings, they talked of finding an apartment to share, somewhere with room enough for all their books and a little garden for Zeus to play in. James spoke of growing his career, maybe even becoming a professor someday. Evelyn confessed her dream of writing her own novel. Through it all, the understood foundation was that whatever path they chose, they would walk it hand in hand. On the 4th of July, they joined the jubilant crowds in watching the fireworks explode over the East River in glittering starbursts of color. As the grand finale lit up the night in a dazzling display, James turned to Evelyn, his face limned in reds, blues, and golds. "I want this forever with you," he said almost urgently. "I want a lifetime of holidays and seasons and moments big and small. I can't imagine my world without you in it." Evelyn thought her heart might burst with the joy expanding inside it. "Forever sounds perfect," she replied simply, winding her arms around his neck. They were still kissing as the last sparks faded into smoke on the horizon. The glory of summer slowly rolled over into the rich beauty of fall once again. The leaves on their beloved park trees flamed into brilliant shades of amber, vermilion and ochre. Pumpkin spice and wood smoke scented the cooling air. James and Evelyn walked arm in arm through the bustling streets, cheeks pinked by the newfound chill. As the one-year anniversary of their first meeting approached, Evelyn found herself nearly overwhelmed by the depths of her feelings. She had never known it was possible to be so content, so utterly in sync with another soul. Some nights she would jolt awake in a cold sweat, reaching desperately for James, terrified it had all been a beautiful dream. But he was always there, solid and warm, to pull her close and soothe her back to peaceful slumber. For his part, James seemed to only fall more deeply in love with each passing day. He began leaving little love notes tucked in the pages of Evelyn's books, surprising her with her favorite pastries on dreary mornings, planning spontaneous adventures to explore new corners of the city together. Evelyn's heart felt full to bursting. On the morning of their anniversary, Evelyn awoke to find a note on James's pillow asking her to meet him at their spot in the park at sunset. Mystified but touched, she spent the day in a state of distracted anticipation. As the designated time approached, she slipped on James's favorite blue sweater and made her way through the familiar winding paths as the trees shed their gilded leaves around her. She emerged into the clearing to find it transformed. The branches above were strung with an elaborate array of Harry Potter-style floating candles, bathing the space in an enchanted glow. Rose petals were scattered artfully on the ground, and a table set for two stood in the center, complete with fine china, crystal champagne flutes, and a sumptuous meal. "Happy anniversary, my love," James said softly from where he stood waiting in a sharp suit. Evelyn couldn't speak past the lump of emotion in her throat as he led her to the table and proceeded to serve her a perfectly prepared steak dinner, staring into her eyes with an adoring intensity all the while. As they finished the last bites of a decadent chocolate cake, James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Evelyn's breath caught as he lowered himself to one knee. "Evelyn, this has been the most incredible year of my life. You walked into my world that autumn day and changed it in ways I never could have predicted. Your spirit, your humor, your brilliance, your kindness, they illuminate every aspect of my existence. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. I want to spend every remaining season of our lives showing you just how much. Will you marry me?" With tears streaming down her face and joy threatening to crack her chest in two, Evelyn launched herself into his arms with a resounding yes. They remained entwined there on the leaf-strewn ground, laughing and crying and kissing, as around them the trees slowly released the last of their foliage to carpet the earth in gold. A year, a glorious, love-drunk year that felt both endless and far too brief. As they basked in the perfect rightness of it all, Evelyn knew that no matter what seasons lay ahead, harsh winters, sun-dappled springs, sultry summers, glorious autumns, she would weather them all gladly with this man by her side. For in a world of constant change, their love would remain the truest thing of all.